This is a session on the Internet Court of Truth and Lies, on how people can become sponsors for trials and make more money than they would be making if they were just participating as jurors on somebody else's trial or participating as a plaintiff in running a trial. But there are ways in which we support people making a lot of money by raising money to pay for trials. And that's really people becoming sponsors for blocks of trials. And there's really no limit. Right now, we have a very heavy limit on the number of trials that we can run because we're effectively sponsoring the trials solely through the company. We have a hard limit of about 10 trials a week. But with other sponsors coming in, there's essentially no limit. There becomes no limit on the amount of money you can make. The deal is, how do you become a sponsor? There's several ways to do it. One way is you happen to work for a company that has some needs in marketing, research, and so forth and so on, and you arrange for the company to sponsor some trials. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to basically go out to the internet, and there are a lot of different ways you can raise money on the internet, but you have to have something that you can offer people that they can't really get another way. The Internet Court of Truth and Lies does is a unique route into figuring out whether some things are true or lies. And the uniqueness is that the supposed truths or lies are tested by dissecting them into verdicts. The verdicts are judged by other people that basically give their views on what the plaintiff thinks was a lie. All of a sudden you get a much better conversation than you normally get through social media. We're going to have a discussion today. What I wanted to do was summarize what we believe would make for a successful sponsor on ability to raise money on the internet to fund some trials of interest to you. The way to do it is you first define your audience. You define the people that you want to contribute money and who may be willing to pay to get the truth or expose the lies on a topic. There are 1,000 ways on the internet that people are used to try to get money while they're participating in providing information on the internet. What the Internet Court of Truth and Lies does is all of the trials are in fact private, but if you're a sponsor, you have all of the trials available to you that you sponsored, and you can stipulate to limit these trials only to the people that designate have a right to see these trials, which would be the people who are giving them money. We can support that from a technical perspective. So you can build a body of knowledge that you can continue to exploit without having to worry that just anybody can get at the knowledge that you've been creating. That's a big key. That's the reason that you get into this. And then the quality of the knowledge can be very high. Brian did a nice description, which I'm not going to bring up right now, but pointing out that the way the Court of Truth and Lies works is it's unique because you get the one person claiming that something's a truth or something's a lie, and then you get 8 other people who dissect that in a structured way. And so the quality of the information you're getting is much higher than the quality of information you normally get out of social media by a long shot. And you don't have to worry about robots and so forth. The robots can play a role in the court cases, but you don't have to worry about the information just being generated by GPT or something like that. The product that you'd be delivering under one of these money raising ideas is any number of truthcourt.net trials where the claims of truth or lies are tested. Funders can get exclusive access to all trials run by a sponsor. Even if all you put in was $10 to fund a block of 10 trials, you can get access to those 10 trials through that sponsor that you gave money to. So it's inexpensive to gain access to the information. And as a sponsor, you can also charge people more for more information or better access to the quality of the information that was provided. You can do things like provide an independent summary of the trial results. The guy can see the trial results and he can also see your summary. You can basically write him some text if he's, for example, a writer or something. A sponsor could potentially do YouTubes like what I've been doing, and what we're doing right now, which is just recording trials and then creating YouTubes off of them. And then those YouTubes become available to whatever the sponsor group is. You can also pay for yourself for your effort. So in the money you raise, you can pay for yourself as well. So this gives you a way to make a lot more money, and also gives Truth Court a way to run a lot more trials than 8 trials a week. Our objective is to run in the millions of trials a week. And if we can do that, then everybody makes a lot of money. I suggested 2 topic areas that sort of seem interesting and fun. One is pet cats. And Natasha, who actually raises cats, she did more than just talked about being a sponsor on the topic of raising cats. She actually gave a really nice overview of the entire sponsorship process. You use which one?
Grok 3.
Grok 3. Grok is just really not bad. It's pretty good. I'm amazed. This is Natasha's overview. What I'm going to do is go over Natasha's overview. This document is a Google Drive document that if you have the link, you should be able to read it.
Who's the money behind the pet cats trial idea? Who's going to pay for it? What's the hypothetical?
The hypothetical is that Natasha would go to GoFundMe and try to raise money for running a block of trials on pet cats.
So it would be a GoFundMe to X number of private persons to fund the trials.
Right. It's raising money on the internet. And it's whether it was GoFundMe or Patreon or any of the other ones that are.
The platform doesn't matter. The question is who's going to pay for it and why do they want to pay for it?
The why do they want it has to do with the privacy of the system. Right now, the trials are run where Bright Plaza is the sponsor. And we can control the privacy on the trials. The way we've chosen to control it is we've said you can't search for any of the trials that we run. You can't just go somewhere and search for them. But if you are a plaintiff or a juror or a moderator in a trial, you've got access to that trial. And furthermore, Bright Plaza as a sponsor allows you to share that trial with anybody you want. Now, it may be that Natasha, for her pet cats one, she says, anybody who funds me to do these trials can see the trials, but nobody can share them except they will be shared to everybody who's funded me. Do you understand that, Brian?
No, I understand that. With regard to the pet cats, it's a question of, is it the ASPCA? Is it the SPCA for some place in Oklahoma? Who's going to be interested in paying for it? Because the proposition that strangers on the internet are going to drop 10, 20 bucks for a summary on that is, in my opinion, dubious. And I'm not trying to say it to be insulting, but I have contacts with the ADL, for example. And so I'm trying to figure out how to market to them. But there's a topic that they're very interested in for trials.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to think in terms of the Kickstarter, the Patreon, how do we bring in people? How do we say, hey, this is worth your time, this is worth your money?
So what you've just mentioned is there's a situation where you have a relationship with some large entity. You could be an employee with them, you have a relationship, and they would be and that's different than what we're talking about right now. We're talking about the thing that you find dubious, which is you just go to, let's say, GoFundMe, and you identify an audience, and then you've got to come up with some way to tickle the audience in such a way that they will come up with $10 to see the results, the answers to the questions. I think the way you actually do that, and you'll see this, is the trial is not on the topic of the cats. The trial is really on a specific, or a block of trials is on, say, 10 assertions of truth, or assertion, mix of truths and assertions of lies about pet cats that tickles somebody's interest enough to put in 10 bucks to see what some of the answers are. Okay. Because they won't see them otherwise. And you understand that this is something where it's not just one expert saying something, it's somebody making a case for something being a truth or a lie, and 8 other people coming in and giving what they believe is. And so when you see the answer, you hear not only the one answer, numbers of answers, so you can actually see whether or not there are other ways to interpret whether or not something's a truth or a lie. You get a much better quality of information than you would get otherwise.
I'm with you 100%. Raise the question of how to tickle. That's really what I'm trying to figure out how to brainstorm, is how do we get that tickle?
So the right answer is, and I've been in publishing, and the right answer is, that's the reason people can sell magazines, is they tickle people's interests enough to buy the magazines. And so you become a publisher. So publishers do make money. You become the source of some information about something that people are interested in getting the answers on. You have to come up with questions or come up with supposed truths and lies that actually interest people. And if you can't come up with that, you probably won't get any money. But if you can come up with some where people really are interested in knowing what the real truth is, or whether something's really a lie and why, then you can probably make money. That's the essence of it. And so there'll be some people who will be very good at this, and there'll be some people who will not be very good at it. Those that will be good at it will make money, and lots of trials will be run, and people who are not very good at it will not make money, and no trials will not be run. And it's just the way it is. Part of the dialogue is seeing what kinds of questions might be compelling. Another thing you can do as a potential sponsor is if you've got access to experts, and often access to experts is as simple as, and this is because I've been faculty at universities, calling up a faculty member at a university and saying, do you want to make $60? These guys don't make money. And they may well say, yeah. So you may be able to actually groups of plaintiffs on subjects that where you may be amazed that they would love the interactions on things that they firmly believe that where it doesn't take a lot of money for them to be paid to participate, but the offer you make to the internet is bringing in these experts where you don't necessarily name the experts, but you bring in experts that are, I don't know, people with just out of the air, people who are trained in government. A lot of people who get a BA or BS in government, where they are experts on government and they can answer questions about truths and lies about government in much, much better ways than people who are not experts. And that's just the number of different possible topics is basically infinite. What we have to offer is exclusive access to higher quality information. But it takes the people who are going to be sponsors to create the information that people find valuable. And you do it by the way publishers normally do it, which is basically having cover material that attracts somebody to buy it. So is that, Brian, are you tracking that?
No, I get what you're saying. I understand the model. I'm just trying to figure out and I'm trying to help with the brainstorming here. I think everybody should be pondering and jumping in. What topics would you feel comfortable putting up a Kickstarter or a GoFundMe, and you think you could talk people into, hey, I'd pay $10 to hear some people's opinions about that.
I'm going to go pretty quickly here into that right now. Let's go directly to that because that is at the core of this. And it's not topics, it's specific truths and lies. It can't be a topic area. It can't be, oh, this is about buying a house. I wouldn't pay
it's
for
not an
that.
instructional
Nobody will
manual.
pay for that. That's just dumb.
Yeah.
It's great that it's there. But if it's more specific, which is, so for example, you will make more money if you hold to your price than you will if you give up on your price for the house when you're selling it. That's a really interesting thing. If you're trying to sell a house, well, I make more money if I just hold out for the price I want. Wow. Okay.
Well, in a rising market, but not in a falling one.
So the whole point is that there are 10 trials there. In other words, but you can do exactly that. Another question, Andrew, that I would put is, how do I tell whether the market is actually falling or rising? You need to be specific. But I can know, for example, whether the market is falling or rising in LA and for certain parts of LA. I can know that, but how do I find that out?
Yeah.
And it turns out that information is often secret.
Yeah.
You can't.
But you seem to be leaning now towards Truth Court as being a quizzing of experts, which
I didn't say that. I said that that's one of the many 100,000 possibilities.
Oh, yeah. All right.
No, we're not trying to reduce that Truth Court to nothing. There are millions and millions of these trial blocks that could be run that would interest people, but they have to be specific. Yeah.
Let me ask this question just so I can make sure I'm on the right page 100%. So what we have is we have a block of 10 trials, and you have one main topic, say, such as death penalty being in every state. So you would have to, in those 10 blocks, would it have to be a different question to summarize up?
It can
Why?
be whatever you, it can be whatever you want. So you can set you can say that the 10 trials are on a topic. You can say the 10 trials, all the 10 trials, here are the actual truths and lies for each of the 10 trials. No topic at all.
Okay. I was just getting some clarification on that way.
You could do whatever you want. And
Whenever I did do a few trials or whatever as a plaintiff, I like to do the ones where I had different segments, like the doxing one. I did 2 or 3 different trials on that.
yeah,
Well,
that's exactly the sort of thing. But the deal is, you want to, as a sponsor, you can approach this 100 different ways. But one way you could approach it is, these are questions I want answered. So my audience are people who have the same questions I have. The point is that you can decide that, and you can hope that you can raise money doing that. What you really are offering is exclusive access to the answers to the questions.
Okay, that makes it a lot more clear for me now.
Yeah. So nobody pays for something that they can get for free.
Right.
They just won't do it. There has to be something that gives them exclusive access. The system is set up to let a sponsor define the access. The trials by default are completely, and they're only made public in certain ways that are defined by the sponsor. And so the ultimate owner of any trial is the person, individual, group, company, government, whatever, that paid for the trial. End of story. Because it can create value out of this. But it's up to y'all to detail out the value. And what I'm going to do is very briefly go over Natasha's things. This is actually worth reading.
You post the link again, because my connection dropped for a moment and I've lost the chat.
I've just posted the link.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what Natasha did, which is I thought very good, was she said sort of the key points, and she said that this is what trials cost and so forth. I'm not going to go through this thing because I want to go to the real meat of the thing, which is how to get somebody to actually pay, which is going to be, what are they paying for? This says contributors will get access to all 10 trials, which is correct. That's a decision by the sponsor to give the contributors access to all 10 trials. We're saying, you would think that if a contributor gave you the minimum amount of money, then they would, by definition, get at least access to the, clearly to get that access, they have to be members, come up on their dashboard, the trials that they've contributed toward or been associated with the sponsor for. There was a fuzziness in what Natasha wrote. She underestimated the cost, and it's more like 3,600 than for a block of 10 trials. But now this is a key element of this thing, which is defining the topic and the trial structure. Natasha came up with some ideas for statements of whether or not something is true or a lie. It needs to be something, whether it was a truth or a lie. And I'm not sure that very many of these anybody would pay for. So cats always land on their feet when they fall. I wouldn't pay for that. I don't care whether a cat can land on its feet when it falls. Cats can see in complete darkness. I would love to know what that means. So to me, something that may be interesting is, can cats see better in darkness than a human can? So can cats see things in darkness? What I'm saying is that would be an interesting question.
Yeah.
And that one I might pay for to find out whether or not cats have 9 lives. I don't know that I'd pay for that. Cats are indifferent to owners' emotions. I would pay for that because one of the reasons I like dogs is dogs are not indifferent to my emotions. Whereas I've never known a cat that cared about my emotions, and I'm sure that they do, but I just don't know that.
You've never
Yeah.
met one of my cats.
Cats can be trained like dogs. Here, from an experimental psychologist point of view, I can tell you they can't. Dogs can
But I
be,
don't know, though.
but they can't be trained like dogs can be trained.
I get mine to sit and speak.
I
and
know
everything.
that, but not like a dog can be trained. We would have been experimenting on cats. In other words, as somebody who was involved in learning experiments on dogs and cats, for example,
See, that's why, because cats are already smarter than dogs.
they're smarter, but that doesn't mean anything. But it's an interesting question, and I might wonder about that. And I might not put it because they train like dogs, but it may be a good question. And again, it's not a statement. It should be cats can be trained like dogs as a truth. And I'd love to hear a trial on that. Actually, wouldn't be a bad idea. Indoor cats live longer than outdoor cats.
Hey, I know someone who trained their cats to go outside like dogs.
Yeah.
Mine do. Mine are
Yeah.
trained like that.
That's smart.
I think you could do that. So there are things that you can train a cat to do. So in my world, in the experimental psychologist learning, we prefer dogs in learning experiments because cats have a mind of their own.
Yes, they do.
And we don't want that. We're doing things where we're studying stuff that we didn't want. Cats can get along with dogs. That may be too vague for me to care about. Cats are more independent than dogs. I think most people would agree with that, and they wouldn't pay for that. Cats can be allergic to humans. That's interesting. I don't know. And it would be an interesting question. So if I'm entertaining getting a cat, I might want to know if cats can be allergic to humans. So I might have to worry about whether this cat's going to be allergic to me. That's a interesting question. I have no idea what the answer is. But again, if the target market is somebody who's thinking about buying a cat, then some of these questions I think are really interesting questions to answer to decide whether they're going to buy a cat or not. This is on the topic of pet cats. And I think that there are all kinds of other questions having to do with types of cats to buy and so forth and so on. But it's the questions themselves that would cause me to pay the $10 to get the answers to those questions, just to see what evidence people are giving. And it may be, as a sponsor, it may be that the plaintiffs will all be cat owners. So the people who are making the case will all be cat. And if you tell me that the plaintiffs will all be cat experts, by some definition of cat, then I might also be more likely to pay for it, because I need cat expert explain to me. There are areas where I can understand. I just honestly don't know. But if the plaintiffs are all vets and they are cat vets, then that's probably a really interesting set of plaintiffs to answer these questions, and then to hear what other people say who are also potentially cat owners. And that gets really interesting fast.
So finding your plaintiff is a different process than getting your people to pay the $10 to see the cases.
No, that's only if you wanted to. So as
okay.
a sponsor, you're trying to come up with a way to get people to pay you the $10. And it may be that the way to do that turns out to be, if you've got a friend who is a vet and you say all the vets in town, and how would y'all like to make some money on the side to help people understand cats? Okay. And they may well go, yeah, that's part of my business. And I'd like them to know that. And by the way, will you mention my name and my who to contact me as the plaintiff, and not just, I don't want to just be anonymous. And of course, you as the sponsor would say, of course, we will mention your name and we'll give them access.
And if, say, for instance, you had a vet that just wanted to sponsor the whole or pay,
And then that's a different thing entirely.
or is it, okay.
So there will be vets that might be sponsors that will get in other vets together.
What I was gonna say though is if they wanted to work with me or whatever as a sponsor and they chime in, do question and answer at the end of each block, like there's 10 block of 10 trials, have the vet chime in at the end for a question and answer with them or whatever.
They could do that, but the Internet Court of Truth and Lies really doesn't give you a way to do that.
Okay.
You could have a trial that summarizes the truth. And I think the key is the value of the person to somebody of this thing. And Brian actually said it, is that it's not just a GPT answer. It's a answer with some other people who are real people who have real experiences. And then this gets really interesting because, as I say, GPT is not always right. But it is a matter of constructing your pitch to raise money, and the place that you focus on things that people want to know what the truth is on something, and they want to hear more than one person's opinion about that truth. They don't want just, one expert saying whatever he's going to say. You want to hear how other people dissect what he says. And because you have no idea how to interpret what he's saying, you just believe him when in fact he may say whatever he's going to say and make you believe something, or have you believe something that turns out to not be true at all. So this is a way to get around that. The other thing that I wanted to emphasize here is that when somebody's paying $10, they're paying $10 into something where they're getting the information without paying the full fee to run a trial. They're just contributors with other people to get the answers. So you're an aggregator of interest. You're not the actual person who lays out the money. You're the person who raises the money to aggregate.
I wanted to know what does it take to become a moderator?
Right now, Bright Plaza is sponsoring everything. And so we have a limit on the number of moderators we can have because we allow each moderator to run a trial a week. And that's it. So the answer is that to be a moderator, you really need to be a plaintiff and a juror.
A lot of red
Twice.
tape.
But if we had more sponsors, if we had 100,000 sponsors, so Bright Plaza is just one. If we had 100,000 sponsors and could run 1 million trials a week, then right now we have about 10 moderators because that's all we can afford with the sponsorship that we've got. But if we've got 100,000 trials being funded a week, then we can have lots of moderators. But a moderator is a responsibility. It has a limited upside, but being a sponsor, there's no limit to the upside. If you can be a sponsor of 100,000 trials, you're making real money.
So
you're becoming a millionaire really fast.
So basically you need more sponsors.
The sponsor is the source of the money that pays for the trials.
Yes, what you said was correct. Yes, we need more sponsors to have more moderators.
Yes.
Absolutely. And this is not a new idea. This is how grocery stores work. I mean, this is how all retail businesses work. They're dependent on the intermediaries so they're either an intermediary that's an aggregator. So a grocery store collects apples, oranges, meat, canned goods, whatever, and aggregates it and then creates a circumstance under which you can't get the stuff without paying for it. And then they are the equivalent of a sponsor in this system.
I've had 5 minutes.
Yeah. So I'm going to go to so I said I would do EVs, and I'm going to go to that at the bottom, I think. Natasha's breakdown is really quite nice. I thought that was a nice little division. She was clearly using Grok, or she said she was using Grok, which is not a surprise. So here's electric vehicle truths and lies. So here's some questions that I think would be interesting to people. People think that you have to have something other than a standard house electric socket to charge an EV. That's not true. I know for sure that every Tesla you can charge just from your 120 volt or 220 volt power if you're in the 240 in Europe. Teslas will charge just fine overnight when you're not using the Tesla on 120 volts. And they are very friendly to your existing house electric system. You don't have to put anything special in. These will not drive as far in cold weather. I would love to know the answer to that question. I've heard some people say that EVs will not drive at all in cold weather. EVs cost more than other cars to purchase. I would love to know whether that's true. It's a hassle to get a government-funded discount on buying an EV. So I'd love to know, if I buy an EV, do I have to apply to the government for a discount? I have no idea. These do not warm up in cold weather as fast as gasoline cars. If you're sitting in an EV, does it take it longer to warm you up in 30 or 32 degree Fahrenheit weather than it does in a gasoline car? And I believe the EVs actually warm up faster than gasoline cars, but I don't know. The brakes do not wear out as fast as the brakes on gasoline cars. I believe that is actually dramatically true. I believe that EV, you can basically own an EV for the lifetime you own the EV and never replace the brakes on the EV, which is crazy. People don't know that. There's no real difference between Teslas and other EVs. I mean, there's another one. Teslas have to be purchased online and shipped from the factory. I have no idea, but it would be interesting to find out what the truths are. So here's 8 questions. I might give you $10 to answer 10 questions, and here are the first 8 of them. And I might be happy to get the answers to those in a week or two, answer those questions in a week or two, just to get good answers, because I can't get the good answers from people. And I've even talked to Tesla salesmen who don't know the answers to these questions.
Bob,
Yeah.
just a question is, those are all quite interesting and valid questions. And would each question be a trial in its own right? Or
Yes,
that
each
is
question is a
some kind
tile,
of a
and so
FAQ?
this is I was trying to list off 10 trials that you'd be
Okay,
paying
I just
for.
saw 8. Okay, I
And
thought
it's very specific. It's the truth of this statement, or is this a lie? And what I might say is we will test whether each of these questions is a lie, or I might say we will test whether each of these questions is a truth. And we'll see what people say. And we will use as our plaintiffs people who have EVs.
Yeah. So this is essentially effectively eight possible trials. Right?
10. I didn't do 2 more questions.
Yeah.
But I would have 10 questions. I did these 8 questions in an hour and 10 minutes ago. Okay. So this is not hard, but this is just an area that I'm interested in. And so I could be a sponsor for this because I'm interested in knowing what the answers to these questions are. And I'm interested, if I can raise some money, getting quality answers where I have control over some aspects of the trial. That interests me. So I can do things like,
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
yeah.
So basically, we just need to answer these 8 questions and say if it's the truth or the lie.
No, there's 10 different trials. So you're dissecting each one of them as a plaintiff. And so there's somebody who's a plaintiff who takes one of those questions and makes a case for whether it's true or a lie. Okay.
Basically,
And
one
then
of the
there's
questions.
8 other people who chime in whether they think they agree with the person.
So basically, you take one of the questions and make it a topic.
Make it a trial, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So each of these, so remember the purpose of this is you want to be a sponsor to make a lot more money. Then what you do is you come up with questions that people will answered in these trials. And each assertion of something being a truth or a lie is dissected by the plaintiff who's making the case that's either a truth or a lie. And then 8 other people are sitting there giving whether they think it's a truth or a lie. And you get not only the plaintiff's view, you get the other people's view of what the plaintiff said. That's really good information. So the quality of the information you're getting is much higher than you get off social media and things like that. But yeah, so if I was trying to sell a sponsorship on GoFundMe, I might come up with 100 trials, 100 questions, and 10 blocks of 10, where I say, depending on how much money we raise, we may only be able to do 2 blocks of these. And part of this thing that I've sent you, you may also be able to charge somebody for asking a question that they want answered, and they have to pay more to have their assertion of a truth or a lie evaluated by the court. But now they don't have to pay for the whole trial. They don't have to pay the entire cost of the trial. It just comes in a block, and the person who is doing the sponsoring can judge whether or not is going to appear in a trial. And he may say, I'll give you your money back if I'm not going to accept your question, which I believe in some of these systems you can do. All these money raising things tend to be very short and very direct. And this is what you're buying. And what we give you the ability to do is make sure that the person is buying something and they can't get it. They can't get this particular set of things from somebody else. And it is because you can't generally search over all the trials, period, that are on Truth Court. Truth Court is set up explicitly to allow other people to make a lot of money while paying other people to actually participate in the trials. So I'll see you all next week. And I'd love to see how this goes. This is the business model we've had since 2020. And no changes to the business model. Okay, we'll see y'all.
You do roll call by any chance?
No, I
Honestly.
didn't.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So
Oops.
just a second.
Oops.
So that's a great idea.
Thanks.
Juror 1,
Yeah, I think that's me, is it? Yeah.
Juror 2,
That's me.
okay. Juror 3,
That was Robin, and she just left.
okay. Juror 4,
That's me.
okay. Juror 5,
Me.
Juror 6, Juror 7,
That's me, Bob.
Juror 8.
That will be me.
Okay, we'll see you.
Bye, everyone.